All right, welcome to the Hunt the Lion podcast. My name is Kerry Alderson. We've got the full crew with us this morning: Sean Randles, Taylor Bars, Kelly Sparland, and Tyler Alexander. And stay away from Tyler. He's what a trooper you are, man. Sick. And is this your flu game? Is this your Jordan flu game?
Yeah, we've been working up for this event tonight, so got to be here.
That's right. Yep. We have tonight Lee Strobel, author of The Case for Faith, The Case for Christ, lots of different books. Seeing the Supernatural is his most recent one, and also the inspiration behind a couple of movies, one that's coming out in December. So that will be going on tonight. And it got us thinking about one specific topic, apologetics. And apologetics early on for me in my faith journey were huge. I came out of college thinking that I knew everything. And I had all these questions about my faith and science and how to put it all together. And somebody gave me a book called The Case for Faith, and it was with Lee Strobel. It talks about creation and talks about all these different arguments. He invested a lot of time flying all over the world to do research because he personally had the same questions, and he did not believe in the Bible, its authenticity, that it could be trusted, didn't believe in the resurrection. And so as he sets out to speak with archaeologists and historians and examine ancient texts and all of these things, over time God worked on his heart and convinced him that this is real. And so he gave his life to Christ, has dedicated the last 40 plus years to writing books and providing resources for people like myself that really was a game changer, honestly, for me. So I asked the guys, what was one of the things in the world of apologetics that you had questions about that God was able to provide some answers for you that were instrumental in solidifying your faith? So I'm not sure who wants to tackle that one first. Do we have any takers? Taylor.
All right. So when I was in college, I would say that's when I was really searching, trying to figure things out. And the question was, why do bad things happen to good people? It's
the hardest question to answer.
And I would say I listened to a bunch of videos online of apologetics, and it got answered for me. And basically, the answer is, if the supreme ethic of all human beings, right, or the most important thing is love, right? What doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. Everyone wants to be loved. That is and there's all different types of love, right? But love is the thing that all human beings want. And in order for love to exist, you have to have the freedom of the will to choose love, right? Because love is two parties independently choosing to love each other, right? Mm-hmm. And just as we are capable of that on earth, that's what God wants for us, right? He loves us, but he has given us the dignity of choice to choose to love him back so that a loving relationship can exist. Because if he made us to just automatically, respond like a computer, right? Then it's not love, because the only way it can exist is with two parties independently choosing. So if that is the case, then bad things can happen because we have to have the freedom of the will for love to exist.
I like that. Who shared that with you? Pastor, professor, friend?
Well,
mentor?
It was Rabbi Zacharias and his team.
Oh, yeah.
They would go to college campuses and people would just ask him the hard questions. I also have listened to Frank Turek and people like that, where they just ask hard questions. And I think it's great, because I would say most of the time growing up in my faith, I didn't have any answers to hard questions. And I think it's really important, because I think, especially in our society, you need to know why you believe what you believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you will be challenged.
Yep. It's one of those C's we talk about: competence. Got to have competence. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have an apologetics issue or topic that you had to wrestle through?
Yeah.
Tyler?
I definitely, I struggled with what Taylor was talking about with being in law enforcement, seeing evil. I couldn't reconcile evil because I wasn't walking with the Lord, so I'd hear from Christians, God is so good, and then I'd see all this evil all the time. Like, well, okay, if God is so good, why is there all this evil?
Yeah.
So very similar to what Taylor was talking about. And then once I started coming to church and starting to hear the word and understand, and I bought in. I was like, okay, I understand some of these lessons. And then my next struggle to stop me from getting baptized, honestly, was I felt like I hadn't earned it. Because I came from that background, a blue-collar family where it's all about you work for what you get. So that held me back. It's like I believe in Jesus, but I haven't earned the right to be baptized yet. I haven't earned his grace and salvation. Again, that's a lack of knowledge of the Bible, but I kept reading through it. And I felt inside like I didn't know Scripture well enough. I wasn't serving enough. Yeah, I just hadn't earned it. I had that works mindset. Like I have to do there's some mountain I'm going to climb, and then God will be like, now you can be forgiven. Mm-hmm. And then once you get into my word, and finally one day, the slow drip broke through my thick skull. It's like, you're never going to earn it, man. It's a gift freely given. And that was just Wednesday morning groups, coming on Sundays, it took years of reading and studying for that finally to break through.
Yeah. So eventually for you, it became a theological thing more than just an apologetics thing. It was this salvation is not earned through some sort of human work, but through Jesus's work. Yeah. Love it. So Sean.
Yeah. My short answer here or question that I had was, it's like the process of sanctification. Because I was like, man, I accepted Christ when I was like 5 years old at Sunday school. And I really meant that. But then I would go on there was no fruit in my life from a young kid all the way through my teens to my early adulthood. It was chaos. There was no fruit in my life. So I was like, man, I accepted Christ, but what's going on? And then like through high school, there would be altar call. I'm like, yeah, that's me. But then there was no fruit in my life. So I was trying to figure out the process of sanctification. So I called into to Every Man an Answer with Mike Kessler on the radio, these pastors, and I asked him, I said, hey, man, I asked him that question because I wanted to know. I'm like, why wasn't there any fruit in my life? And he goes, well, that's the process of sanctification. So I was like, well, what's that? And I just didn't know because I wanted to know why there was no fruit in my life until the age of like 23 when I fully walked with the Lord. I was like, what was going on that whole time? He said, well, that's sanctification. So that's just something I'm still even working through right now that I don't really understand fully, but maybe we'll get on that subject someday.
1 Thessalonians 4. What is God's will? This is the will of God, that you would be sanctified. So people ask all the time, what is God's will? I just want to know what God's will for my life is. God's will is that you would be sanctified. That's part of what his will for your life is. So how does that happen? Through difficulty, through challenges, through hard days, through questions. Those are the moments where we become sanctified, what you're talking about, and we become more like Christ. So none of us like to work out. None of us like hard things. None of us would sign up for it readily and excitedly, but we all want God's will in our lives. And that sanctification process you're talking about happens as a part of God's will for us to grow closer like Jesus. So Kelly, apologetics, you have a topic?
I have a question.
Yes.
We use words like sanctification and apologetics, right? These are religious words for more or less. Like that, we don't use those in our everyday life most of the time. So I guess my real question is, what is your definition that we're going on of what apologetics actually means? Because the experiences in my life versus the people that I've talked to versus what I've read are very different. So I guess when you're talking about apologetics, like what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so apologetics usually end up being the biggest, what is the word I'm looking for? Contest or challenges to the Christian faith. So a lot of it has to do usually with creation. The big ones are creation, the resurrection. Did Jesus actually physically resurrect in bodily form? And then another one, apologetics, would be the problem with good and evil. Those are kind of the big three. And so I'm trying to remember the word apologia. I can't remember where it is right now, but it is how we as believers, we talk about that, having that competence of God's word. We have the competence to be able to share a cogent answer with somebody who has a question on one of the big questions regarding our faith.
So in that case, I would say when I was young doing mission trips with my parents a lot, the things that I witnessed and the things that I saw of other religions around the world and these people that we would meet up with, and they would claim what they were doing was the way, or however you want to put that, but the way they treat people just never sat right. Like I would, and it could be like the individuals of who I meet, but it was more or less like an internal conviction, just watching things that I saw happen because I was young, right? Like I wasn't very old and I didn't really know how to process what I was watching. So I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Right. So like watching my parents or watching the guys we were with interact with these people who are Muslim or who are Buddhist or who are Shinto or wherever we happen to be, watching them interact and just feeling like I don't agree with the things they're saying. I have no reason why I don't, because I wasn't smart enough to know that, but something inside me was like, that is not correct. So I don't really have I have 1,000 stories I could tell, but for the most part, it's just more like an inner conviction of what I'm hearing and what I'm witnessing is not accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I like that. So for me, thanks, Sean. Sean pulled up that verse, 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to give a defense of the gospel. So the word apologia is in there. I think it's defense. That word is apologia. So that's where apologetics comes from. And it's just giving a reason for a question, basically. So for me, reading the Case for Faith, there were two really great illustrations they used. Bachelor of Science, again, I'm thinking scientifically all the time. You guys are wired the same way. You want to figure out what is the scientific reason for something, how does this work? What is the process by which this came about, And so in Genesis, like the whole creation account, really, I was just like, man, I can't wrap my head around this. And, down to like the cellular, the protein, the molecular level, all of those things when it comes to creation. There was an illustration, and I wish I had the full thing. But at the end of the day, there were so many scientists that came to the conclusion that to be able to just randomly by chance put all of those things together into one recipe that would create human life would be the equivalent of completely dismantling a 747 jet all the way down to the very last screw, completely dismantled. Take the whole thing completely apart, every single aspect of it, scatter it without rhyme or reason across a runway of an airport, and then hoping that the wind would come through and blow all of those pieces together into a working jet airliner. That is mathematically what you would be hoping for if you were going to put everything together that would create human life. And these were not guys that were necessarily Christians. These are just guys that study science. And they're like, man, the odds of this just coming together like by accident. And we see that now. I mean, you see all these guys, all these scientists that go on these podcasts, Huberman is one of them, just like as he studies the brain and talks about this stuff. And I don't believe that he is a Christian, but he's like, man, there's got to be something. There's got to be a God. There's been so many people like that. So that was one of the main apologetics things. Another thing that I struggled with was the resurrection. Was this just some sort of legend? I mean, we have people and guys that we know that like speak in hyperbole all the time and make up stories and exaggerate things. And maybe we even do that a little bit. Not as much as our friends do, of course. But that happens, right? And so like, how can we trust that this happened? He lays out the authenticity of Scripture in such a great way by studying with, talking with lots of different experts. I believe one of them is Gary Habermas. He's like the world's most famous person when it comes to researching the resurrection. One of the big arguments is dispelling the legend myth. Most of the gospel accounts are written within 30 years. So if you think about any one of us trying to say that we were something that we weren't 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And how many people would come out of the woodwork if we claimed to be something that we weren't? There would be line of people coming. If I said, I scored the game-winning touchdown against North Medford, and I had 300 yards receiving that night, and I was the state player of the year with full rides to every D1 in the nation. Like, people that I haven't talked to in 25 years would be saying, hey, I was on the team with Kerry. That's not true, right? And so imagine making that claim that you are the Son of God and you rose from the grave. Of course, that would be contested, and there would be plenty of people that could come out from the woodwork. When you have James, the half-brother of Jesus, writing about his brother saying, yeah, he is the Messiah, that right there adds a layer of, I believe, comfort for the believer to say, okay, the people that knew him and were with him are not contesting this. And the disciples died brutal deaths, not denying what they were claiming. You guys have heard it said, many people will die for something that they believe to be true. But there isn't a person alive that would die for something that they know is a lie. Maybe one person would, I don't know, some crazy person, but all of them, there's no way. Every single disciple would be brutally tortured and killed for a lie. And so those were two things for me that really solidified my belief. If you are somebody that struggles with deep questions like these, I would encourage the Case for Faith, the Case for Christ, instrumental when it comes to apologetics. Anything else to add on that before we move on?
I disagree. I agree with you. That's the biggest evidence for me of the resurrection is the disciples, the way they died. The fact that Peter you don't get crucified upside down for a lie. You just don't.
I don't count it worthy to die like my Savior. Flip me upside down before you do this.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like you take one of the most brutal ways to die already, and then you just make it a little bit worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and if you have anyone who has two boys as sons, for one to actually say that the other one is who he said he was, like that's... My sons fight and argue all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But for one to just be like, yep, that's who he was.
Yep.
Like,
I'm sure your boys say this all the time. Right. That's cap. That's cap. He's capping. He's capping. That's not true. That did not happen. So you're right. Yeah. Sean, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, just last thought for that would be a lot of people struggle. If they struggle with like the mathematics in the science and they're like, I need to figure this out. And they're still struggling, even though they read that stuff and they hear it. What I've seen work so effectively is a testimony, and that's biblical. I had this guy. He was on a job site with me, and he was a builder here in town. And he's like, "Oh, you're a Christian?" He's like, "Hey, could I meet you for coffee? Because I have some questions." And I was like, and he went to science college stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, let's meet up, dude." So we go have some coffee, and he's like, he had these questions about the Bible because I was a Christian, and I was just like, you know what, man? Hey, I don't really have all the answers that you're looking for scientifically, but dude, check this out. I got a testimony. Let me tell you. I told him my testimony, and then he's like, dude, I got chills. And then he's like, you know, that's what he needs maybe to hear. Instead of trying to figure out everything mathematically, is you got to go find somebody's testimony and be like, oh man, like that dude was not that same person before and after meeting Jesus. So some people need that testimony for real. Like I seek people's testimonies out there. Like if you Google like, I don't know, people's testimonies out there, you'll hear some really cool stuff that you're like, there's no explanation for it. And that's what this guy needed. Almost like, I didn't have your scientific answers, but I do have a testimony. It was pretty cool to see his reaction to my testimony. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's life-changing. You, when you've experienced something, and I would say, we've got executive producer Nathaniel Duarte in the studio right now, and he actually has a podcast for Edgewater called Jesus is the Deep End, and he's going through some of that, getting some stories from people kind of behind the scenes at Edgewater too, that not everybody has really had a chance to hear their story. So check that out. Taylor, final thought on this topic?
Yeah. A question I ask people that don't believe is, well, do you believe in evil? Right. And 99% of people will be like, yeah, of course I believe in evil. It's like, okay, well, if you believe in evil, then by default, you believe in good, right? So there is a moral law of good and evil, right? And if there's a moral law, then it automatically deposits a moral lawgiver, right? Because you and me can't decide.
That's right.
What that moral law is.
That's right.
Because so if you believe in good and evil, there is a higher power, right?
Mm.
So that automatically points to God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting when people are like, oh, well, I guess if you and I can't decide, then there is somebody above us. It's like, because it's easy to point out evil in this world. So,
you can't get away from it. Yeah. So, moving on to the next question. I was going to look it up, but I can't find it. We got two kind of cultural things, and I want your guys' perspective as godly leaders of your homes, Christian, Bible-believing, Bible-following men. There was a story that came out a few months ago, and it's kind of gaining traction again. A national story about the priorities of college-age young women versus the priorities of college-age young men. And I think they separated it by voting, if you voted conservative or if you voted liberally. So that would also distinguish some difference here. So the ladies that voted for Kamala, I think, a year ago, and the young men that voted for Trump a year ago, they interviewed and did some research on them. And they found that the overwhelming majority of the young ladies, far and away at the top of their list, put their number one priority for their life was to have a fulfilling career in a professional sense. Far and away. And also, I would add, the bottom of the list was having a family and kids. Completely, well, not completely, but almost flipped for young men. Number one answer, family and kids at the top. Career was near the top for the young men, but it wasn't. Maybe it was 2 or 3, but number one was family and kids. A lot of people are saying this is going to be a problem. Declining birth rates around the world. China's in full panic mode because for years they were saying have one kid. Well, that doesn't math. Eventually, that does not math. If you can only replace 2 people with 1 person, eventually you're headed in the wrong direction. And so what are your guys' thoughts on this topic, and how does that narrative get changed or influenced as a dad, as a godly leader? What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, as a father of 2 daughters, my wife and I have talked about this. And our deepest desires and the way we're raising our family is to prioritize, telling our daughters how amazing it is to be a wife and a mother. And, my wife, we run a small bakery out of our house, so they still see my wife contribute economically, but it's not the priority. The priority is for her to be home with them, spend time with them. And they know I work full time. It's just we really emphasize that. That is important to us. And then through using the Bible, that's what the priority is. So it's as parents, as Christian parents, be okay telling your daughters, it's one of the most amazing things you'll do is be a wife and mother, and what a gift that is from God.
Taylor, I'm curious what you think, because your wife has a teaching degree, had a teaching career. We'll get to Kelly too. Kelly's wife has a career, different stages of life. Right now, Sean's wife is at the being a mom stage. So we've got everybody kind of across the board here. So what do you think?
I think, we had a lot of pretty hard talks about this because my wife is a very, very smart. She's valedictorian. She's very gifted. And when we got married, she's going to school and got her bachelor's and her master's. And I just told her, I was like, you really got to figure out what is the priority, because, and I told her I would support her in either one. Mm-hmm. But if you become a doctor or something like this, you invest all this time and then you have a massive amount of debt, right? And I was working as a civil engineer, and I was like, I can't pay the debt and, right?
Yeah.
And support us. So you have to figure out what's the most important, and then, and the decisions that you make are pigeonholing you into one thing. So, that's why she ended up getting her master's in teaching. So that way she had that freedom, right? Where if I die, right, and she needs to make a living, like she can. And I think that's good. But she doesn't have, like, because we don't have all this debt where it has to be paid back.
Yeah.
There's this quote I love, and I'm going to change it just slightly, but it said, "In the morning of my life, I sat on in this one it says my grandmother's knee, but I would say mother as well. And she told me who I am." And it's like, the priority should be, in my opinion, when you have young kids, like, you're telling them who they are. You're telling them this is who God made you to be.
Amen.
And you are not the job you do. Like, it's really interesting. Some people, like, they don't differentiate between, like, this is my job, like, this is who I am, but then this is what I do, right? It's all kind of wrapped in together. Like, my value is in my career. My value is in how much money I make. My value is in how successful I am. And one thing we were talking about in our men's group that Luke Treptowski said that I thought was awesome is, like, how do you define your currency? Like, what is the most important currency in your life? Is it strictly financial? Is it, like, what's most important? And I would say, depending on what is most important, like, that determines what you tell your kids is most important. And societally, like, we have been telling women the most important thing is that you have a successful career, right? So that's very prevalent, obviously, in these statistics, because that's what's been hammered into people. And so that's what they're parroting. And I've talked to, especially, like, you talk to people after their career, right? Maybe when they chose not to have a family or whatever. And it's like, man, there's just an emptiness there where the people that have children and grandchildren, like, there's such a joy, and there's just beyond, like, well, this is what I did. Like, I maybe designed this great thing or created this, but, like, 20 years, like, that was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and no one even knows about it. Right? So it's like, where are you investing your time? Into your legacy, your children? Like, there's another quote: "The things that you do for yourself, you take with you when you die, and the things that you do for others, you leave behind."
Love it. Yeah, that's good. I would say, too, there may be people listening that are wondering, where do I fit in this if I haven't been able to have kids? You know, and that's such a challenging thing, and it's so heartbreaking because you see so many, like, people that are in that spot that would be amazing. And I'm sure they've had their questions, and they've had their struggles, and they've had their frustrations. And I come back to Matthew 28:19 that says that we're to go and make disciples, you know, and part of the role of a husband and a wife is to multiply. And I think that means multiply disciples, not just, I mean, of course it means to have kids. Of course it does. But I think that also means to multiply, making disciples in whatever ways you can, pouring into nieces and nephews, or getting involved in adoption and foster care and those kind of things are also ways to be a blessing. There's so many kids out there that need somebody. So if you're in that spot, yeah, man, praying for you for sure. Not easy.
Yeah, and I was going to say what Taylor was talking about with women who want to be career minded, which is fine. They found, I just was checking out this study. Women that hit their young to mid 30s that just were career driven, they now are, like, empty, and so they go out maybe to, like, a sperm donor because they really want to have a kid, and they have one. And so the study was based on single parenting, single moms out there. And they're finding single moms aren't just like a dad that left the house. They're finding single moms are the ones that did that. And they went out and they wanted a pregnant just to have a kid so they felt worth. So you're finding a lot of single moms out there, is that right there. They got a career-minded, then they got into their 30s and they were empty. They're like, I really want to have a kid now. Oh my gosh. So then they become a single parent because they're not married and they're not going through the way like that. So I just did that whole study on juvenile justice and why these kids are locked up with no parents and why is it single moms, and that was one of the factors I never even thought about was like a mom going to a donor, a sperm donor, and just getting pregnant because they feel empty without a kid because they were career minded. But for me at my house, my wife is actually really smart, and she went to like some dental school. She was going to dental when we married. She was at a dentist office, going to be a hygienist. She was going that route. Then my career, we moved around and we just didn't. So then, just like you just said, Kerry, too, we settled down, and then we were trying to have kids. And so it took us 5 years to have our first kid, and then 5 years to have our second kid, just based on body.
Yeah.
My wife was really struggling to have kids, and she would look around and be like, oh, these girls just, I'm going to have a kid after this one. I'm just going to have one after this one. And they're planning it. And my wife really struggled with that planning of having kids because we wanted the kids at this certain age and stuff. It just didn't work out. 5 years for one, 5 years to have the second one. So my wife knows exactly what that feels like out there. People who are really struggling to have kids, it was just like, it was 5 years for one and 5 years for another. So we couldn't just plan the perfect age gap that we were trying to. It was just like God's timing. You want to say that, but it really was the Lord's timing. Like however he had it, we had a different plan, but so my wife knows exactly how that feels, or we do as a married couple.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, what are your thoughts on this topic? Just the priorities for young men and young ladies.
The depth of that topic is ridiculous. So I feel like the start of this talk, especially if you're doing it just as an individual, like having your own priorities is one thing. But when you're joining with someone and you're getting married, now you have to have you guys have to agree. Like this is why
you have to align.
Choosing the correct partner is such a big deal.
Huge.
Right? And being able to like negotiate and work this area, because this is just one area that you have to work, not to mention like how you're going to parent, like the parenting approach that you take. Mm-hmm. Man, the depth of okay, so I would say being career oriented as a woman, I'm not a woman, so this is outside looking in kind of thing.
Thanks
is a
for
great
sharing.
thing. Yeah, no worries. I am named Kelly, so
Thanks for
there could be
clarifying.
some confusion. But it's a good thing as long as, like, if that's all you want, you're upfront about that coming in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, if you get married and then all of a sudden you came into this completely career-oriented and your husband agreed with you and he is also career-oriented, and then 2 years in, you, like, completely flip and now you want a family, and he's like, well, we agreed when we came in here that... So I feel like it's all okay what you choose. It's just being open and honest about it and being able to communicate and be flexible with.
Communication is key. Yeah. Up front in the beginning. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think all of you guys, I would agree with all of you guys. Yeah. You know, communication, what is the priority? Proverbs 31 lays it out that it's not like a woman can't be industrious and make things and be contributing financially. You know, I think Tyler's house is real clear indication of that, obviously. But I mean, just think about it like in really basic terms. Like, are we leading our families? And you guys have kind of touched on this as we talked about. Are we leading our families to be those that are just trying to acquire and collect things? Because that's why you would want a second job, kind of. You know, I mean, it is difficult in our region to get by on one income. It is difficult. It is very much a challenge in Southern Oregon. But for the most part, two incomes are providing a lot of people with some luxuries. And so, or some status, you know, I got this degree, or I accomplished this, or I work here. I have a daughter who's a freshman at Biola and she wants to be a doctor. And I'm like, I'm in support of that. You're smart enough to do that. And I want to be a grandpa. So figure out how to balance those two things, because I don't want to wait 40 years for you to, you know, so, but yeah, obviously ladies need to be able to use their gifts to be a blessing in the kingdom. But I just think generally we as the leaders of our homes need to put the priority on God and his people and highlight how beautiful the family is. And if you do that, I think what you just create is people that desire that, you know. So I grew up in a loving, connected, great family, and it's been something that has really driven my ministry. It breaks my heart when I see young kids that don't have a mom and a dad that are raising them in a home where they're stable and all of those things. So that's been a big thing for me. The other thing that I think that comes into play when we start talking about this is there's been one part of the population that has been told you don't need the other part. And that isn't the case with everything. But for the last 40 plus years, girls have been told, you don't need a guy. You don't need a guy. You don't need a man. And in a spiritual sense, we all just need Jesus, of course. But if we go back to Genesis 2, God says we do need each other. He did create us for a wife, and he did create a husband for the wife, for the gal. So to say that is actually unbiblical. At the end of the day, number one, you need Jesus. Number two, God has shown in his design that we do need each other. That's how life works better. So your pursuit of a holy, godly, biblical life should be to have a godly family. It is biblical. So that is part of what God's will is for us. So in that process, we get sanctified, we glorify him, and then we multiply the kingdom. Kelly?
I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
So, I believe it was Paul who said that was not married, right? And he is like, well, if you're not married, it's easier for you to worship, and
yeah.
But if you are married, then so how do we reconcile those things?
Well, it's what I'm trying to think.
I think he's talking about sexual urges. Like if you're someone who can control your sexual urges, then it's better to be unmarried and spend your time worshiping the Lord and serving the Lord. But if you're like most people and you're not going to be able to not sexually sin, it is better for you to get married and have a family. I think that's what Paul was talking about.
So there's two, I'm trying to think of there's two terms that you'll find in the Bible. There is prescriptive, and the other one is the same but the opposite. I can't think of it right now. So there are things in the Bible that are in there for us that are like, this is how it should be done. And then there are things, why is the word failing me right now? Like suggested, right? And so you have throughout the Bible, like, this is a good thing to do, but it's not a mandatory thing to do, right? So God can be glorified in either one of those, right? So, and I'm really mad that I can't think of the two words right now, but yeah, that's a great question because that is in the Bible. So, not everything in the Bible is a mandate, I would say, but there are a lot of things in the Bible that say this is a part of God's design. And if you do it this way, you'll be blessed. But that's not the only way to do that thing, right?
So something that really, this whole population crisis, it really interests me. I've listened to podcasts on it. If women make it to the age of 30 without having a kid, their chance of ever having a kid goes down to 50%. And like for me and my wife, we want grandkids. So we've talked about it, what we're willing to sacrifice. A lot of people put emphasis on retirement accounts and whatnot. And they've shown if you can get young couples married and in a stable home environment, doesn't have to be a fancy home, but just stable, they'll start having kids. And the data shows if you have your first kid now, you actually are more likely than the past, in 1960 or 50, to have your second, third, fourth kid, as long as you have the first one. A lot of people aren't having the first one, but people who are having kids are having more kids. So I know for me and my wife, I'm willing to work till I'm 80 to help my kids get stable. You know, I'm willing to work till basically I die to help to have grandkids and help them get started. I don't want to give them everything, but I do want to help them get stable, get married when they're young. And that's a priority for me and my wife.
That's a great priority. Paul says that anyone who doesn't provide for his own family and his family's family. So that's not just your kids and wife. Anybody who doesn't provide for his family and his family's family is worse than an unbeliever. That is a verse that really challenges me and motivates me, I think. So I do have an obligation to go beyond just my kids and my wife, but that extends into what you're talking about, helping the grandkids and their family get off to the right start. And then knowing that God's going to take that and use it down the road with the next generation. So, prescriptive and suggestive, those are the two biblical terms. One is you have to do it. It's prescribed. The other is it is suggested. Taylor?
Yeah, I think kind of along with what Tyler and Kelly are saying, I feel like it's the prioritization of first your marriage, right? Then it's the prioritization of your family, which flies in the face of our current culture, which would say the most important thing is you.
Yeah.
Your career, what you want. It's like, no. Like in a marriage, right? To be successful, you go, okay, well, this is my gifts and talents. This is your gifts and talents. How can we partner in that to have a successful marriage and to pursue the Lord? And a man and a woman coming together is the only way that you can make a family, right? So it's like, it's just really beautiful when both parties are choosing to make the collective priority more important, right? And I think that is the sanctification process for myself, because being naturally selfish, it's been very good for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I read something real quick?
Yes.
Just on this topic? I agree. So before I read this, I agree that what we're talking about is correct, and having a family is a big deal. But this is from the Bible app, and I just pulled this up real quick because I just read this not too long ago. And families were God's idea from the beginning. There's no greater institution and no better social organization to affect positive change in the world than the family. There's no better place exists for learning the essential principles of life than the family. And nowhere can the truths of God's word be more effectively taught and modeled. But conversely, no institution or social group has more power to destroy a person than the family. Physical and verbal abuse, as well as neglect, can damage the emotional well-being of a child well into adulthood and often for the rest of their life. The failure of parents to teach spiritual truths to their children directly impact their relationship with God and how they treat others. So, while I agree that it has to be modeled, right? Like making a family is just a part of that. Now that you have a family, now we have to actually follow God. Now we actually have to model godly behavior at home. Now the husband and wife have to actually grow together towards God and show the kids that this is what it's supposed to be like, right? So I feel like the depth of this conversation is, like, there's so many, we could talk about this for days.
We could. That's right. Yep. But we are running out of time. Before we go, I want Kelly to share just a quick background of what you were involved in serving our country. There are 5 of us here. One of us served, and Veterans Day is, well, when this episode airs, Veterans Day would be tomorrow. So I come from a family with a lot of guys, uncles, grandparents that served, and tell us a little bit what you were involved with, but something that maybe just the general public or just people that come to church, like, maybe just don't have a big awareness about, that maybe the church could do a better job of. We have a veterans group, but I feel like it doesn't get a lot of attention. It doesn't get a lot of support or highlighted.
We have a veterans group?
Exactly.
I legit didn't know that.
I know. Yeah. That's something that we need to do a better job of. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was in the military. I did 12 years. I was in the Navy. I was a Navy diver. I retired from SEAL Delivery Team 1 in Hawaii. I did deep submergence for a while, submarine rescue, that kind of thing.
So you're comfortable being underwater?
Yeah.
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 For the most part. More than any of us.
Yeah, as long as there's air, we're good.
Yeah. I bet he doesn't even use floaties.
Just water wings. That's it. But one of the things that I notice from the military community specifically is a large majority of us deal with mental trauma that whatever we encounter, like throughout our time in the military, whatever your job happens to be. But there's this like stigma or dogma, I don't know what the right word is, but there's this thing that we're supposed to just tolerate it well and like move on with life. And there was hardly, when I got out, there was hardly any resources or help for military guys that were going through really hard times or didn't, like, adjusting from military life to civilian life is so hard to do, even if you're 100% healthy. So for anyone who has like a mental disability or has trauma, PTSD stuff, or physical disabilities, like that transition is just amplified of how hard that is. And just I would say that for the common person to recognize and be patient with their transitioning from military life to civilian life, just be patient. Like it will come. And what I see a lot of people are like impatient because they're not they're like in a hurry to get them out of the military. Like, you've been out of the military 6 months. What's taking you so long to, it took me about 2 years, a little more than 2 years to finally, I had to move to Japan to do that and teach martial arts and train over there and just live in Japan and bounce at a nightclub for me to get my mind right and then come back here. Like, it is not easy to do.
And that's a part of your testimony. And one of these days, and have you share that? We'll have all the guys share just their testimony, and you can go more into some of that stuff. Some of the stuff you've shared with me has been pretty crazy. And my wife, her dad left at 3 when she was 3 years old. He was a Vietnam vet and had a really bad drinking problem because he was struggling with so many things. He had PTSD, and he would wake up in the middle of the night and be like choking my wife's mom and not even know what was going on. He'd be on top of her. So it became a dangerous situation. And so although he bailed on her at 3, she's harbored no ill feelings or anything. 'Cause if anything, she's been frustrated at evil. Like we were talking, Taylor was talking about earlier, like she knows that the evil in the world is what caused him to become who he was and how he dealt with it and stuff. And so it breaks my heart to see that his whole life he's had to overcome these things because of what he experienced in just that couple year period there. And I think it's really important that you highlight the fact that patience is huge. We have no idea. My cousin got out. He's about our age. He was in Afghanistan. He said he couldn't even go to like Fred Meyer and walk around the store because he was so on edge. And so I was like, you can't just walk. Like, he needed like windshield wipers. He couldn't even go to the store without just like breaking down,
I've seen some guys that, I don't know if you know who Eddie Penny is. He was a Team 6 guy. He's been on Sean Ryan and stuff. He's one of the main reasons why Sean Ryan has converted to Christianity. I highly recommend Christian men follow him if you're interested in that kind of thing. But one of the realest depictions in a movie that I've ever seen, and I don't like comparing real life to movies because usually they're terrible, but in the American Sniper, there's a scene where he's sitting in front of a TV that is not even on, like the TV's off. It's just, and like the war is actually happening in his head, and he's got like, you can hear the sounds and his friends screaming and the gunshots going on, and he's just sitting there staring at a blank TV, and his wife comes in and was trying to talk to him, and he's like in the middle of combat in his mind. Like I've seen that happen to a lot of people. And I will say that with this trauma-based thing and all of this mental stuff, the best thing for them is God.
Yep.
And no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it's almost taboo in the military, right? Like talking about God was like, you don't do that. And God, being faithful and giving your life to Jesus will transform you faster than anything else you can do. And if you commit and dive in and just give your life to Jesus and let him do the work, things happen really fast. And they happen dramatically. And for some reason, military guys don't want to talk about it.
All right. That's huge. Well, we all thank you. I know it doesn't get said enough, but very few people are willing to make the sacrifices that so many of you guys had. So we thank you. And great words there. Share the gospel with those guys. Be patient with them. Just thanks, gratitude. I think that's a huge thing. So, and that is our theme for the month as well. We'll be talking more about that in the next couple of weeks. All right, gentlemen, thank you. We will be back here next week. God bless you guys. Until next time, hunt the lion.